All right, guys, we're here with Thomas Blam. Welcome to Oversteer TV. For those who don't know, he is the chief strategist for Flying Lizard Motorsports, one of the premier teams in the American Le Mans Series. How are you doing today, Thomas?
Oh, great.
Mhm. Um, Strategist in American Le Mans Series, just for the people who don't know what that is, that's similar to like the crew chief or something in NASCAR who pretty much calls the race, tells the guys when to come into pit, all that stuff, right?
Correct.
All right, so in the American Le Mans Series, it's an endurance series, so I'm sure you probably do not get a lot of sleep during the races, during those weekends. In the American Le Mans Series, with the Flying Lizards, the Porsches, what does that entail? Let's say right before the race even starts, what is your job?
Well, hopefully by then I'm ready to go. I typically try to do some pre-race strategy notes. I spend a lot of time before that particular weekend looking at that particular race from the year before, looking at timing and scoring. Results. I can look at live feeds or replay the feeds from previous years. Just get a feel for kind of the way the races went before, and then have a basic outline of what I think I'm going to do for the race. Um, Obviously, once the race starts and there's some cautions or something like that, everything changes. But hopefully, by the time the race starts, I'm just ready for the race to get going, and then get into the routine that I use during the race to make those decisions once the caution comes out. So.
Well, during the race, I guess your two things you're looking at the most is probably fuel and tires. Um, During the race, which is the key to you? Which do you key on more, the fuel consumption or tires?
I mean, from my side, it's a little bit of both. I work closely with the engineers on tires. Obviously, I'll lay out my plan, what I think or what we should do if there's a point in the race where it's questionable whether or not we should take tires or not. I'll confer with the engineers, and then we'll ultimately make a decision on that point. Fuel is obviously critical. If you can make it on one fewer stops, or if you decide you're going to make a call where you come in and know you're going to have to make an extra stop, but you're guessing you're not going to lose a lot of track position, then fuel comes into play there. For us, with the way the rules are, a lot of it's what the other teams do. The rules in the American Le Mans Series have changed over the last few years. The main focus used to be what the overall leaders did, trying to get that wave by. And a few years ago, they started playing around with the rules, and because they were having some class splits when they have such a great battle in GT, and a couple of cars up front get split from the rest of the group. It obviously takes away something for the fans that are expecting a close battle between a lot of cars. And so they've changed the pace car procedure in the American Le Mans Series that keeps all the GT cars closer together. So, that's changed my thought process going into the season. Now we're more almost in a class to ourselves, or more like an overall leader. So I've gone back and looked at great teams like Penske, what they did when they were in the series, and looked for patterns and things like that. But from my side, I'm obviously always very conscious of where we are fuel-wise, whether or not we're going to have to do an extra stop or not. On the tire side, that's more of a decision we make going into the race, and then if a situation arises where we may want to play something a little differently, or we at the back of the pack, could we come in and get fresh tires, things like that. I'll discuss that with the engineers on the car.
All right. Flying Lizards usually runs two cars in the American Le Mans Series. Are you the strategist for both cars during the race, or does one of the cars have another strategist?
Our team manager, Eric Ingraham, does the strategy on the 44 car. But he and I work closely together. He and I, we have several strategy meetings prior to the race, just the two of us, plus with other members of the team. Once the race starts, it would be very difficult to try to do it for multiple cars if you really want to try to do it well. But Eric and I work closely during the race. I'll bounce ideas off of him. He does the same for me. And like at the Long Beach, when unfortunately we were out of the race from the lead. I sat and obviously try to help him any way I can with some scenarios. So, but no, there are two strategists, one for each car.
I wanted to ask you about what happened in Long Beach, but first, um, during the race, with American Le Mans and the most endurance series, you have two different drivers. Besides the strategy, when obviously one driver has a different style than the other driver, do you adjust that? Do you try to adjust it to what your fuel strategy or tire strategy is to each driver, or do you like sometimes during the race tell the driver, "Hey, listen, I need you to drive this way to save fuel or this way to save tires"?
For sure. I mean, again, if it looks like it, a couple of years ago at Mid Ohio, we were going to be very tight on fuel to make it to the end. We made a decision. We were concerned about our clutch, so we elected not to stop when some of the other cars stopped under a caution. Felt like we could make it to the end, but obviously had to be very strict with the drivers about how much fuel they could use, and were able to get to the end and then won the race. But some drivers use a little more fuel than others, and in that cases, you just have to watch them a little more. It's good to have telemetry now this year in GT. Obviously from just an engine, side, knowing what, that everything's fine from that side. But as a strategist, it's nice that we're able to see what the fuel usage is every lap, and we don't have to bother the drivers for that information anymore. But the guys are ready to do what we ask them, and if we're telling them they need to go to a leaner map or something of that nature, that we've got something we need to have accomplished by doing that.
You said about Mid-Ohio making the call and everything. When the race does start, as chief strategist, are you the man who makes the call, or you just make the suggestions to the team principal?
No, I mean, I make the calls on the 45 car.
Mm.
Again, as I mentioned earlier, the only probably point of discussion potentially would be tires or no tires at some point, and in the end, I have to still make that call. But that's the one area where I'm happy to take some input from the engineers, and we'll have a discussion about it. And I may or may not win the argument, but it usually works out well. But other than that, once the race starts, I'll make those decisions.
Mm. I also see you guys are entered into 24 Hours Le Mans. I assume you're probably working really hard already for that race, or playing the strategy.
Yeah, that's for us. It's a completely different race. The pace car procedure is completely different there. So it's just a different focus that we have. So I'll start getting prepared for that. The next few weeks. I've obviously looked at it a little bit already. I'll spend a fair amount of time rereading the rules. They're slightly different than the American Le Mans series. See if we can find something there that we don't use in the American Le Mans, so we don't get caught out. And then the guys are hard at work in California getting the cars ready. We've got one test between now and then we'll get through that, and then we'll get ramped up for Le Mans. But it's our first year with two cars there, so we're obviously very excited. We've got one car in the pro class in GT and one car in the amateur class, and we feel pretty good about the chances of both cars, so it should be pretty exciting.
Oh well, I can imagine you're probably trying to get a lot of sleep, a lot of rest for that race. Because 24 hours is a long time. It's probably more grueling than Sebring for at least the crew.
For sure. I mean, obviously the crew guys, they put in unbelievably long hours in the lead up to that event. For the people who don't know, the practice sessions start late in the afternoon, evening, and don't end till midnight. So by the time you get back to the hotel, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and then you're up early in the morning. So by race day, the guys are pretty worn out. Hopefully you can get them some good sleep on Friday night. We're not on track on Friday. They just do the final race prep. And then they're hopefully able to get a little bit of naps in between the stops. We run about an hour there, so hopefully they can get some cat naps in between the sessions, in between pit stops. And but for me, I'll be up with Eric. We'll up 24 hours or more if you consider we'll already be up early that morning for the warm up, and it's fairly easy to do when you're in the role that Eric and I have, being the strategist, where you're constantly trying to, figure out what to do. But once the race is over, obviously we're pretty exhausted and ready to get some sleep at that point.
Well, you mentioned earlier about Long Beach. Your car was left the race early, unfortunately. What actually happened there? We watched it on TV. We really didn't know exactly what happened.
I think he just got a little bit of pickup trying to get by Scott Sharp. Scott
Mhm.
was on a strategy call where they stopped early, but for what they were trying to do to work, he had to stay on the lead lap in GT. We were the leader in GT at that time, having just gotten by the BMW, and so he obviously was going to fight very hard to try to stay on that lead lap, and Patrick was able to get by him. And from what we can tell, he probably got just a little too much pickup on the tires. He actually broke earlier for that corner than he had in previous laps, but there's probably just enough pickup for it for the car to slide a little wide. And obviously, as we know, street circuits, there's no room for error, and that was it. So it's obviously a shame. We really felt like we had the car to win there. We qualified fairly well, but pretty early in the race, Patrick already said over the radio that he thought we had the best car, and the lap he got by the BMW already cleared him by 8 tenths that lap, and so I think we had a good chance to win the race. But those things happen. It's street racing, and I don't. I know Patrick was a little upset with Scott, but he had his job to do, which was to try to stay on the lead lap, and Patrick got by him, but it just didn't work out in the next corner. So it's the way it goes sometimes. But at least we had a fast car. It could have been worse. We could have had a slow car and crashed out. So at least we're pretty happy with the performance of the car, and we'll see how it goes at Le Mans, and then we'll obviously have a little bit of a hole in the points for this year, but still several races to go, and we'll see what happens.
Well, Thomas, I want to thank you very much. By that phone ringing all the time, I'm sure you're a very busy man, so I'll let you go.
All right, appreciate it.
And I hope to see you on the podium in Le Mans.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.